If you've been riding long enough, you know the real damage never makes the headlines. 2 weeks before the new year, China released its 2026 motorcycle manufacturing plan, and most riders never noticed. But buried inside it was something that should concern anyone still putting serious miles on a Harley. Heavyweight cruisers and long-distance touring bikes were officially listed as priority targets. Not concepts, production, backed by money and scale. This isn't about one bad year for Harley-Davidson, it's about a shift that threatens the foundation the brand has relied on for generations. Stick around till the end, because after we break this down, I want to hear from riders who've actually lived this. What you ride, how many miles you've logged, and whether you think Harley can still turn this around. What's happening? The announcement did not come from Milwaukee, and it did not come from any European boardroom. It came from a state-backed Chinese manufacturing summit held behind closed doors 2 weeks before the new year. Riders across the world woke up to a quiet headline, but the meaning behind it carried the kind of weight that changes markets permanently. China confirmed its official 2026 motorcycle strategy. And for the first time, heavyweight cruisers and long-distance touring were openly listed as priority targets. This was not rumor. This was not speculation. This was a national plan, backed by industrial muscle and funding most motorcycle brands could only dream of matching. But the real shock came when the first model tied to that initiative was revealed early: the CFMoto 450 SS. On paper, it looked like a simple sport machine. In reality, it signaled that China had mastered refined engineering at a price and scale that directly threatened Harley-Davidson's future buyer pipeline. The bike arrived with clean build quality, sharp tolerances, and a ride experience that early testers described as far more mature than expected. The message was unmistakable. China was no longer practicing, it was executing. And if a mid-weight sport machine could show that level of refinement, riders began asking a question Harley hoped would never surface. That question grows stronger as the 450 SS reveals what China is truly prepared to build next. Why the 450 SS changes everything. Seasoned riders know when a machine is built with intention. The CFMoto 450 SS does not try to reinvent the sport bike category. It does something more dangerous. It perfects the fundamentals in a way that feels deliberate, mature, and grounded in lessons taken from decades of Japanese and European engineering. Test riders who approached it expecting a budget imitation walked away stunned by its balance, smooth torque delivery, and tight chassis feedback. It was not flashy. It was not gimmicky. It was engineered with purpose. That purpose became clear as early teardown notes surfaced. The engine layout showed careful machining, not shortcuts. Heat control matched what riders normally expect from higher-priced competitors. Electrical routing looked organized instead of experimental. Even small details like switchgear, feel, and panel fitment hinted at manufacturing consistency rarely seen at this price range. This was not a knockoff, it was a warning shot. For American riders who value reliability, the 450 SS stands out because it represents a shift in engineering identity. China is no longer chasing style points or trying to shock the market with outlandish designs. It is building refined, predictable machines that behave exactly the way experienced riders expect. That shift matters, because when a mid-weight sport platform feels this dialed in, it means heavier machines and touring platforms will follow the same disciplined philosophy. And the moment this engineering maturity appeared, Harley's biggest vulnerability finally came into view. If this breakdown is hitting close to home, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for the next updates. Harley's demographic wall finally cracks. For decades, Harley-Davidson survived market turbulence because its buyer base remained fiercely loyal. Riders started young, moved through mid-weight cruisers, and eventually bought the touring machines that carried the brand through economic slowdowns and cultural shifts. That pipeline functioned as Harley's unspoken safety net. But numbers from dealership floors, registration ages, and rider surveys have shown a pattern forming long before the Chinese announcement. The average Harley buyer today is older than ever, and the entry-level flow that once replenished that loyalty is thinning every year. China's timing exposed that weakness without even trying. The release of the 450 SS created a direct alternative for younger riders who might have once entered the Harley ecosystem through used Sportsters or older Japanese cruisers. Now those riders are choosing a new machine with modern tech, manageable weight, and a price tag that does not force them into used inventory. Dealer admissions confirm the trend. Fewer new riders walk in, asking for starter cruisers. More walk in comparing value, comfort, and long-term maintenance instead of tradition. Harley's demographic wall held for decades, but it was built on the assumption that new riders would always drift toward American cruisers eventually. The 450 SS proves that assumption no longer holds. If the first step into motorcycling changes, the entire path downstream changes with it. And once that demographic pressure appears, the effects spread far beyond a single brand. Before we go deeper, make sure your own setup is solid. The gear I rely on is linked in the description. Take a look, and let's get back to the shift that could reshape American motorcycling. An entire industry suddenly faces a new playing field. Every major manufacturer watches China's expansion with a mix of caution and calculation. The new state-backed initiative makes it clear that China is no longer content supplying parts or filling niche categories. It intends to lead. Import forecasts already show increased volume allocations for mid-weight and heavy platforms. Suppliers who once served Japanese and European brands now report inquiries from Chinese builders seeking long-term contracts at higher purchase volumes. That kind of scale reshapes the playing field before a single machine reaches American soil. American and Japanese companies feel the shift in different ways. For Harley, it means competing against refined machines, priced aggressively enough to challenge its entry and mid-market foothold. For Japanese manufacturers, it means defending their reputation for reliability at a time when Chinese engineering is maturing rapidly. Riders who track industry patterns understand that once a new competitor proves consistent quality, the rest of the market must adjust or lose ground. Every comment from insiders echoes the same sentiment. This is not a momentary surge or a brief experiment. It is a coordinated industrial strategy backed by manufacturing discipline and long-term pricing power. Riders who have watched the industry through multiple decades recognize the tone. It is the same tone that preceded major shifts in the 90s and early 2000s. And with the landscape reshaped, the deeper story begins to unfold. The 800 CLC just redefined the used market overnight. You can learn a lot about a motorcycle's impact by listening to the conversations that take place when buyers think no one from corporate is around. In several dealerships recently, the talk has shifted from wondering whether new Chinese models will sell to wondering what they will do to the used market. The 800 CLC hit showroom floors with a price that forced both new and used American cruisers to hold their breath. Riders who follow price sheets closely saw numbers that pushed right up against the cost of well-kept machines from earlier generations. Machines that used to be the go-to choice for anyone wanting value without sacrificing reliability. Suddenly, the conversation had changed. Market floor chatter confirmed that buyers who would normally start with a 10-year-old cruiser were now comparing that same budget against a brand new machine, offering modern electronics, clean build lines, and factory warranties. Dealership staff noticed it immediately. Customers lingered longer, asked sharper questions, and no longer assumed that older American iron automatically held the advantage in long-term value. For seasoned riders who understand the used market as well as any mechanic, this shift felt like confirmation of warnings they had voiced for years. A competitively priced, well-built machine does not need a legacy to create pressure. It only needs to show up with confidence and consistency, and confidence took an entirely different shape with the next machine to enter the picture. Benda's LFC, 700 proves design rules can be broken successfully. Riders have seen plenty of experimental designs come and go, but the LFC 700 arrived with something uncommon. It challenged traditional cruiser lines without slipping into novelty. The long, stretched stance, the low-slung silhouette, and the aggressive proportions looked like they belonged to a concept sketch. Yet riders who saw it in person found themselves taking a longer second look. What surprised many was not the bold design itself, but how intentionally everything was executed. The geometry felt planned rather than improvised, and the bike behaved in a way that suggested the styling was not just for show. Rider reactions collected from early demos made it clear that this machine was not dismissed the way many expected. Instead, older riders who value clean engineering and deliberate design found themselves respecting the effort, even if it was not their personal style. The machine delivered smooth, stable behavior at speed, and its proportions worked better on the road than pictures suggested. The engineering intent felt focused, with careful attention given to balance and throttle response. It was proof that design rebellion, when paired with structural discipline, can earn credibility rather than mockery. That credibility forced a new question onto the table. If a manufacturer can break design rules this effectively, what else might they be ready to challenge next? The next challenge arrived not in lines or proportions, but deep inside the engine cases. The SRV 900's V4 brakes, a tradition Harley never expected anyone to challenge. For generations, the American V-twin has shaped expectations of how torque should feel, sound, and behave. The SRV 900 did not try to copy that formula. It arrived with a V4 configuration built around smoothness and predictable power delivery, something riders familiar with long-distance use have always appreciated. Dyno curves released from early tests showed a torque band that rose steadily without the hiccups or spikes sometimes associated with rushed tuning. The engine felt refined, almost calm, even when pushed toward the upper range. That calmness mattered because it signaled engineering maturity rather than experimentation. Tuning notes collected from teardown evaluations revealed a focus on heat management, vibration reduction, and long-term reliability. For mechanically literate riders who have spent years evaluating engines by feel alone, this approach represented a break from tradition that deserved attention rather than dismissal. The V4 did not chase theatrics. It pursued consistency, and in doing so, it offered an alternative riding character that felt both modern and dependable. Riders who once believed no configuration could challenge the V-twin's authority found themselves acknowledging that competition had arrived in a form they did not expect. The tradition had not been replaced, but it had been challenged with respect and technical clarity. And that challenge grew even larger when the focus shifted to heavyweight territory. The 1200 CLC walks straight into heavyweight territory without blinking. The moment the 1200 CLC appeared on comparison sheets, riders noticed something unusual. Here was a machine with real physical presence, genuine long-haul intentions, and a price that ignored the unwritten rule that heavyweight cruisers must carry heavyweight cost. It did not whisper its intentions. It walked directly into a segment Harley once dominated and laid out a package that forced riders and dealers to rethink assumptions they had repeated for decades. Pricing comparisons made its impact impossible to ignore, especially when placed beside models known for their premium badge rather than their evolving engineering. Market whispers suggested that production strategy behind this platform was built for volume, not niche experimentation. Dealers in several regions reported that riders who usually limit their comparisons to American touring rigs were now asking detailed questions about seating position, heat management, and long-distance stability on the new model. That kind of serious inquiry does not happen unless a machine earns it. Older riders who prioritize comfort per dollar began noticing that the value equation had shifted, and that shift carried more weight than any marketing claim could offset. The 1200 CLC did not attack the category. It simply arrived prepared, and preparedness is often more disruptive than intention. With these machines proving their capability, the consequences for the broader market are already taking shape. The middle of the cruiser market erodes first. Riders who lived through the golden years of the cruiser boom remember when stepping stone machines shaped entire generations of long-haul loyalty. A rider could start on a modest displacement model, learn its manners, and eventually move into a heavier touring bike without feeling overwhelmed or financially stretched. That middle ground kept the culture alive because it created a natural path forward. Today, that path is breaking apart. As competitively priced imports enter the market, the traditional stepping stone segment is losing its grip, and the consequences are showing faster than many expected. When mid-sized cruisers no longer serve as the reliable entry point, riders reconsider where their loyalty should begin. Dealerships report that younger buyers, already cautious with their budgets, are now comparing the cost of a used mid-sized cruiser against a brand new import equipped with modern features and clean engineering. That comparison used to end predictably, with heritage winning on trust alone. It does not end that way anymore. Each season that passes without a strong mid-market contender deepens the erosion of long-term loyalty, because riders who do not start with a brand rarely stay with it for life. The change feels quiet, almost subtle. But those who watched similar shifts decades ago know what comes next. A market weakens from the center, long before the edges feel it. And the next segment to feel that pressure is the one many assumed would stay protected. If you want to stay ahead of the changes shaping this industry, make sure you subscribe now. The next reports are already unfolding, and riders who follow early understand the road better than anyone else. Stay informed and ready for what comes next. Touring is no longer a safe stronghold. Long-distance riders judge motorcycles differently than most. They care about stability, heat management, saddle shape, and how the machine behaves after 500 miles rather than 5. For decades, that mindset kept heavyweight American touring bikes insulated from outside competition. The arrival of foreign entries, with genuine engineering maturity, however, has broken that insulation. Touring, once considered a fortress, now faces challengers built with quiet precision and long-haul purpose. Riders who put down serious mileage have taken notice, and their reactions suggest a shift that will not fade. Reports from riders who tested these new touring platforms indicate that comfort, weight distribution, and thermal control are no longer areas where American machines automatically dominate. Manufacturers across the ocean have studied what long-distance riders value and have applied that knowledge with discipline rather than flash. This approach challenges the long-held belief that touring excellence belongs to a small group of legacy builders. The shock is not in the performance itself, but in the realization that capability has become accessible at a price point many did not expect. When comfort becomes a competitive battleground rather than an inherited advantage, the market's foundation begins to move under everyone's feet. And as comfort evolves, another force steps into the motorcycle world with resources few can match. Automotive giants enter motorcycling and rewrite the rules. Veteran riders know how quickly an industry can change when a company with deep pockets and industrial discipline enters the scene. The automotive giants moving into motorcycling today are not experimenting. They are applying the same testing depth, manufacturing scale, and supply chain efficiency that allowed them to dominate car segments for decades. When that level of infrastructure enters a field built largely by tradition and brand loyalty, the rules shift naturally. Riders who once dismissed these companies as outsiders are now recognizing the seriousness behind their designs. Supplier comments reveal that some components destined for these new machines are produced in facilities far larger and more automated than anything most motorcycle brands operate. That kind of scale changes pricing, parts availability, and quality control long before customers ever hear about it. The motorcycles benefiting from this industrial muscle arrive with consistency that is difficult for smaller builders to match season after season. Riders who respect engineering more than marketing understand the implications immediately. If a machine is built with the rigor of an automotive assembly line, its long-term reliability and cost efficiency may surpass expectations. The competition becomes less about identity and more about capability, and that comparison rarely favors legacy alone. With the landscape shifting at the manufacturing level, rider behavior begins to reflect the new reality. Rider behavior begins changing faster than Harley can react. When purchasing patterns begin to move, seasoned riders can sense it before the numbers ever appear on spreadsheets. Across multiple regions, dealers report that buyers are approaching showrooms with a different mindset. They are asking practical questions first, emotional ones second, and in some cases not at all. The idea that a brand could carry a sale on tradition alone is losing ground to the reality of maintenance costs, comfort metrics, and real-world value over time. Riders who once made decisions based on identity now compare options with the same discipline they use when choosing tools or trucks. Practicality speaks louder than loyalty when wallet pressure increases. Dealership contraction is already visible in areas where foot traffic has slowed. And shrinking loyalty pools mean that long-term planning becomes difficult for brands that rely heavily on repeat customers. Riders who built their garages over decades are now advising newcomers to look at function first and reputation later. This shift does not come from hostility toward legacy brands, but from a recognition that the market offers more credible choices than before. When experienced riders begin recommending alternatives based on value, the ripple spreads quickly. Buying habits adapt long before companies can reorganize around them. And with behavior changing at this pace, the broader market consequences begin taking shape in ways few predicted. Honda, Yamaha, and BMW quietly adjust their strategy. Riders who have tracked motorcycle history across decades know that the biggest shifts rarely start with headlines. They begin with quiet adjustments inside engineering departments, supplier contracts, and long-term product plans. That is exactly what is happening now among Honda, Yamaha, and BMW. None of these companies will issue dramatic statements about China's rise, yet their actions speak clearly. Honda is refining its mid-weight lineup with an eye toward efficiency and broader global appeal. Yamaha is strengthening its parts pipeline in regions where supply pressure is expected. BMW, always deliberate, appears to be reinforcing its premium touring identity by investing in long-distance comfort and electronics integration. None of these shifts are loud, but each one reflects an industry preparing for a competitor that does not rely on tradition to sell motorcycles. The planners inside these companies understand that the future will not reward brands that hold still. Pricing strategies are already being reconsidered as import competition grows, and several models long protected by premium positioning may face revaluation. Riders who have watched these companies evolve over many generations recognize the signs. Quiet repositioning always comes before public change. And while companies adjust quietly, the political and economic forces shaping their decisions grow louder every season. Political and economic winds tilt the battlefield. When seasoned riders talk about the motorcycle industry, they often mention engines, heritage, and road feel. But beneath all that lies a broader reality that influences every machine on the showroom floor. Tariffs, trade routes, currency fluctuations, and political partnerships all shape the price and availability of motorcycles. The current economic winds are tilting the battlefield in ways riders can feel, even if they do not follow policy closely. Nations reliant on foreign manufacturing must decide how far they want to go to protect domestic producers, and the choices they make ripple directly into motorcycle pricing. Political decisions add friction to markets, especially when governments attempt to influence where products are built and how they are imported. These pressures create tension that rides alongside the machines themselves. Riders who distrust both government and corporate decision-making sense how these forces complicate the future. When a motorcycle's price reflects not just steel, engineering, and labor, but also tariff battles and geopolitical positioning. The path forward becomes uncertain. The rise of Chinese manufacturing introduces leverage that many nations did not expect. Supply dependencies form quickly when companies rely on low-cost parts, and reversing those dependencies takes far longer. Riders may not see the paperwork, but they feel the results. And as the policies shift, the people on the ground begin preparing for an industry that no longer resembles the one they grew up with. Dealers and workers prepare for a different motorcycle landscape. Behind every motorcycle on the road stands a network of mechanics, service writers, technicians, and small family-run dealerships that have served riders for generations. These people form the backbone of the American motorcycle ecosystem, and they sense the tremors long before executives or analysts do. As imported models offer competitive pricing and long-term warranties, smaller dealerships struggle to maintain foot traffic. Some have already consolidated, others have shifted heavily into used inventory, and a few are beginning to adopt foreign brands simply to keep their doors open. Workers and service departments see another side of the story. When new machines arrive with simpler layouts, modular parts, or advanced diagnostic tools, technicians must retrain quickly. Some welcome the challenge, while others worry about losing the familiar systems they have mastered over years of wrenching. The change is not just technical, it is cultural. When a service bay shifts from working on long-standing domestic models to imported platforms with different engineering philosophies, the identity of the shop begins to evolve. Yet the resilience of these workers remains steady. They have weathered booms, downturns, recalls, and entire generations of redesigns. Their focus is survival, adaptation, and continued service to riders. And as the people inside the industry adjust, the riders themselves face a moment of decision that will define what the next era looks like. The new era arrives. Every major shift in motorcycling eventually returns to a simple truth. Riders choose what lasts. They decide which machines earn respect, which brands stay meaningful, and which traditions remain worth defending. The new era approaching is not defined solely by foreign competition or changing economics, but by a deeper question about identity. Riders must determine whether they value brand heritage above all else, or whether they prioritize engineering, comfort, reliability, and long-term cost. The answer will not be the same for everyone, and that diversity of opinion is what shapes a culture. Some riders will stay loyal to the machines that shaped their memories, while others embrace comfort, practicality, or new affordability. Many will stand between the two worlds, respecting tradition but recognizing the strengths of progress. What matters is that riders keep control of the story, rather than letting corporations or governments define it. Legacy will evolve, not disappear. Motorcycling has survived every major transition because riders choose what deserves to endure, and in that choice, the future of the entire landscape is decided. Harley has weathered storms before, but this moment feels different because it's not loud, it's structural. Riders will ultimately decide what survives, just like they always have. If this breakdown hit home, drop your thoughts in the comments and share what you're riding and how many miles you're still logging. If you found this useful, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because the next chapter of this story is already unfolding.